Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about singularities in international relations and geopolitics. What a singularity really is, it's a social, scientific, technological concept which actually comes from Einstein. Einstein, when he was talking of his theory of relativity, talked about singularity as that point where basically normal rules and laws of physics do not really apply. And then, so we have to move into, I guess, theory of relativity and what it says about quantum physics. But in general systems theory, singularity essentially means that when small changes have huge impacts, when small shifts can have major consequences, then we call them singularities. So in today's conversation, I'm going to talk to you about 4 singularities. Well, we don't know whether they are singularities, but they could potentially become singularities. So I'm going to talk about 4 small developments which could have a huge impact on geopolitics and international relations. Those 4 are the developments that are taking place with respect to Iran, Saudi Arabia, and China, India, US, and Canada, Houthis, US, and Israel, Hungary, EU, and Ukraine. So these are the 4 minor developments which I think could have big geopolitical consequences. So before I unpack how this could potentially happen, if you have not subscribed to Conversations, please subscribe to Conversations, like the video, press the bell icon, and share this video with your friends and your social network. So first, I want to talk about the recent meeting hosted by the Chinese foreign minister and director of foreign affairs in Beijing, in which the deputy foreign ministers of Iran and Saudi Arabia participated. So what this meeting or trilateral meeting was about essentially was a continuation of the so-called Beijing sponsored rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They have exchanged ambassadors, they established diplomatic relations, and as you recall, a few months ago, the foreign ministers of both those countries came to Beijing, and so there is a development of some kind of confidence-building measures between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and all 3 countries, basically bonded over their shared concern over what was happening in Gaza. They probably also bond over the fact that the United States often tries to marginalize these countries and tries to impose the so-called rule-based order on these countries, especially the rule-based order that it doesn't apply to Israel, for example. So this is an important development for the simple reason is that for the last 5-10 years, the geopolitics of the Middle East has been dominated by the US, basically advancing Israeli interest in the region and using the growing influence of Iran, Iran's various tactics, using its own proxies in the Middle East, in which it even attacked Saudi Arabia's minefield, oil fields a few years ago. So what has happened is there's a fear of Iran in the region, especially by Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. Their fear of Iran essentially drove them closer and closer to Israel, and essentially triggered the Abrahamic Accords, which were designed to integrate Israel into the Middle East, and the Palestinian peace process, and the Palestinian demand for a statehood, etc. So Saudi Arabia was running towards Israel because it was frightened of Iran. But if Beijing can bring about an understanding between Iran and Saudi Arabia, then perhaps these countries will realize that they have much more in common than they have with Israel. And so I think that even though these are small steps, in the long run, they could have a huge impact, because partnering with Saudi Arabia, partnering with China, and even with Russia allows Iran to get around the sanctions regime that the US has imposed on Iran and its economy. But if Saudi Arabia feels more confident with regards to Iran, then it does not need to essentially become a vassal state to Israel or the United States, dying for their security guarantees because they are frightened of Iran. So this is the first singularity. If this can continue, then it could have a major impact in the geopolitics of the region and also brings China into the Middle East and basically expand its role and significance in the Middle East. The second singularity that I think is what has happened in EU yesterday. Orban has announced that he's going to veto the $50 billion, the 50 billion euro aid package that EU was putting together for Ukraine. EU has two packages. One is for its, I guess, well, I don't know, they're just throwing money at Ukraine. So $50 billion and then additional money for other purposes. And Orban, who walked out when the vote was taken about Ukraine's accession to European Union, so at the behest of the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, he walked out. So basically, he didn't vote for it, neither did he veto it. But on the subject of aid to Ukraine, he is determined to block that aid. There are explanations that because of his proximity and his close alliance with Moscow, he's going to do this. So one of the reasons that Orban is blocking this is the perception that he's closer to Russia and perhaps is doing Putin's bidding. But really what Hungary is about is the $30 billion of frozen EU money that was to come to Hungary for various reasons, including managing immigration, etc. So because the EU thinks that Orban is not following the rule of law, I don't know why Europe now talks about rule of law. We can see the rule of law being broken by the US and Israel too, using white phosphorus, etc. But anyway, that's an aside. Let's pretend that Europe cares about rule of law. And so because Europe apparently cares for rule of law, it had frozen 30 plus billion euros of money that was due to Hungary. And Hungary is basically using its leverage, trying to block the money to Ukraine in order to get it unfrozen. And I think by not blocking Ukraine's dialogue for membership in EU, he's already achieved 10 of that $30 billion, but 10 of the 30 billion euros, but still 20 billion euros are still frozen. So I think you can see Hungary. But if there is a strategic reason why, or Hungary is blocking it, then it could have a long-term impact. And with Republicans in the United States delaying or blocking aid to Ukraine, it is quite possible that the West is going to lose the Russia-Ukraine war if Hungary continues to block aid to Ukraine. So this is the weakest of the singularities. I think Europe will break its own rules, will destroy its own veto principles in order to help Ukraine. But that will have a severe impact on EU itself as an institution. So it is possible that if Hungary is able to indeed block aid to Ukraine, it can have a huge impact on the geopolitics of Eurasia and increase the profile and significance and influence of Russia. But that is less likely to happen. But it is a potential singularity that could have a huge impact. The third singularity that I want to talk about is what Houthis are doing in this. If you look at the map, Houthis are based in those shaded areas of Yemen. Those are the territories that the Houthis control, and about 10% of the global trade goes through the Red Sea. So it goes through the Gulf of Aden, and then it goes past Bab el-Mandab Strait, through the Bab el-Mandab Strait into the Red Sea and all the way towards the Suez Canal. So what the Houthis have started doing since the Hamas-Israel war began is targeting ships which are going to Israel. That's what they claim, that they're targeting. They're using drones, they're using missiles to hit ships. They have hit a few ships, And one of the consequences of this has been that two of the European shipping lines, Maersk, which is based, I think, in Denmark, which is the world's biggest shipping line, has stopped its ships from going through Red Sea. Another German-based shipping company has stopped its ships from going through Red Sea. The U.S. is sending its navy there to protect ships, but nevertheless, what the Houthis are doing are having a huge impact on the global economy. If this continues for a few months and they are able to stop not just ships that are going to Israel, but all trade ships going through that area, then either it will trigger an expansion of the Israeli-Hamas war, where the US now directly engages Iranian proxies or with Iran. Or the second thing that could potentially happen is that the US may hit a few targets inside Yemen, but the trade will decline, and that will cause inflation, etc., in the international global economy, whereby it could impact many economies, especially in Europe, and also exports from Asia. So exports from Asia and imports in Europe could get hit, especially with energy related exports could get hit hard by what Houthis are trying to do. It is interesting, and the reason why I think this is a huge thing is because if you notice that the last few months, the world is the center of global geopolitics is actions by non-state actors. What Hamas did in Israel, and now what the Houthis are doing. So we are seeing that global geopolitics are being tremendously influenced by non-state actors. And in that sense, to me, it tells me that this is a very important development. What the Houthis are doing are doing what Russia and China cannot do to oppose the sole domination of the Middle East crisis by the United States. So they're challenging US hegemony on the basically Israeli-Palestinian issue. So that's why I think this is a huge issue, even though it may look like a small act of piracy or international vandalism. The fourth issue, which I think could have major geopolitical impacts, is the current state of India's relations with US and Canada. For the past 2 years, we have been seeing India and America come closer and closer and become more and more strategic partners, doing great things together in the arena of trade, in international governance, in global governance, and also on defense issues and AI and advanced technology and critical technologies, etc. The US has repeatedly asserted that US-India relations are the most consequential relations of this century. All of this is keeping in mind the rise of China. If India aligns with the West will continue to dominate world politics and the Indo-Pacific region, whereas if India does not cooperate with the West, then China begins to seriously challenge US and Western hegemony in the world. And if India and China combine, it's quite possible that we might see a new era of Asian dominance. So it's very critical which way India aligns itself. So this little issue with the alleged attempt by Indian government officials to assassinate a Sikh activist in the US is now reaching a much more serious proportion. The US, the Biden administration briefed 5 members of the Congress who are part of the Indian Americans, basically, Ami Bera, Pramila Jaipal, Ro Khanna, Raja Krishnamurti, and the latest one, Thanedar from Michigan. These 5 Congress members were briefed by the US administration, and this is what they said after the briefing. I mean, obviously the briefing is classified, so they cannot fully reveal what evidence was shown to them, but it is very clear from their reaction that the US administration has a very serious case of India's governmental involvement, and therefore the Congress members said this: "We appreciate the administration providing us a classified briefing on the Department of Justice indictment of Nikhil Gupta, which alleges that an Indian government official engaged in a murder for hire plot of an American citizen. As members of Congress, The safety and well-being of our constituents is our most important priority. The allegations made in the indictment are concerning. We welcome the government of India's announcement of a committee of inquiry to investigate the murder plot, and it's critical that India fully investigate, hold those responsible, including Indian government officials. See, this is the tricky demand. What if this was a raw operation? What if this was ordered by the Minister of Home Affairs or Foreign Affairs? What does the US want India to do by holding them accountable? This is the tricky part, I think. Investigate a murder plot, and it is critical that India fully investigate, hold those responsible, including Indian government officials, accountable, and provide assurances that this will not happen again. So basically, they want the Indians to basically hold their own operatives responsible and also reverse their policy. We believe the US-India partnership has made meaningful impact on the lives of both of our people, but we are concerned that actions outlined in the indictment could, if not appropriately addressed, cause significant damage to this very consequential partnership. So this is really, in my opinion, the biggest singularity. If this little thing can throw a wrench in this global partnership, strategic partnership that alters the global balance of power, global balance of power in military sense, global balance of power in economic sense, global balance of power in the knowledge sense, especially with regards to cutting edge technologies, then this would be very, very critical, I think, that this issue is resolved as quickly as possible, and it does not have a long-term impact on US-India relations. There are voices in the US itself which are saying that we can't trust India anymore. And there are voices in India saying that we told you we can't trust the US from the very beginning. And so suddenly the level of trust between the two countries has suffered significant damage. So I think this is the fourth singularity that we all need to keep an eye on. I've already done several conversations about it. So the point that I'm trying to make in this conversation is that we may think certain diplomatic or geopolitical developments not very important, but they can have an oversized impact on global geopolitics. And I think these four events that have happened this week can have the potential to transform global politics and global geopolitics. So I hope you found this discussion useful and thought-provoking, more importantly. And if so, do subscribe to Khanversations, like the video, press the bell icon. And if you like to support Khanversations, please become a member of Khanversations by joining Khanversations. The button to join is right next to the button to subscribe. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar.